You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back, Health Innovators. I am so excited about today's episode. I have some incredible special guests with me. We're kind of flipping the script a little bit, and I am interviewing authors of a book that I read about a year ago and that really was very impactful and very inspirational. And so I'm so grateful that both Richard Jaffe and Charly Jaffe have decided to and agreed to join me today. So welcome to the show.
So good to be here.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Yeah. So just to give our audience a little bit of context, just some high level, a little bit about your background and what led you to writing the book, Turning Crisis into Success.
Well, we have a little different idea. Why don't you share, Charly? Go ahead.
Well, would you like the reality or his version?
No. My version is I used to go out and talk to business school students about 10 ingredients to happiness and success in business and life. And I went to Cornell. Instead of flying back, I'm in San Diego and other places. I said, why don't I write a book? And so I started writing a book and I showed it to Charly, and Charly says, Dad, you need my help. Let me help you. That's how it really happened. Now Charly can tell you.
And the way that everyone else remembers it and that we have in writing. He had asked for some help in editing when he first started out. And I don't hold back when it comes to my dad. And I've always loved writing. And so I started giving feedback and he was like, hey, this is really helpful. Do you want to do this together? Will you co-author this with me? And I said, absolutely. It was just such a fun idea to get to work and spend more time digging into his past. And to have the excuse, I didn't know then, but to have the excuse to ask questions like, so what were your childhood insecurities? To really kind of like dig in, which was just really, really, really special.
I can tell this is going to be a very, very fun conversation.
It always is.
Yeah. So Richard, just to kind of create a little context, tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're not going to be able to go through the entire story of your entrepreneurship journey, but just give us some of the highlights.
So I went to Cornell University. I came out, started with my family an Italian ices business in 1975. Back in the early days of frozen novelties, struggled mightily, almost went broke every single year. Fortunate around to turn it around. We ultimately took it public, and then we sold it to Coca-Cola. And then I went in to run it for 2 years for them. And then I left, and I was 34 and took 3 months off and was given another opportunity to start a latex glove business. And this is back in 1987, 88, back when the AIDS crisis was really hitting. And so we went into that in Malaysia and Thailand and started that up and almost went broke several times, turned it around. We took it public in 1993, and then we sold it to Kimberly-Clark in 2000. And I currently mentor startup entrepreneurs and sit on a few boards. So I can tell
you that so many people that are listening want to have that story. Like I struggled, I almost went broke, and then I exited and it was a success.
Well, I tell you, part of the secret is I hired some very smart people and I just happened to be very lucky. So, but it worked out very well. Wasn't sure it was going to. So I decided instead of going out to talk about it, I'd sit down and write a book to share it with more people. And an audiobook as well.
And you certainly have. And I think one of the things that impressed me most is your transparency and candidness about the difficulties and about the failures. I have a lot of people that come on the show and, they gloss over it. Either they don't want to talk about it or, they want to be able to just gloss over it and act like, oh, it's just a little speed bump. And, and I think that gives, the rest of us in the in entrepreneurship community kind of a false sense of what this journey is really like.
Well, Roxy, I have to tell you, I didn't have a choice.
I was about to say.
Because, remember, Charly wrote it, she interviewed me, but when I would tell her what happened, she'd say, Dad, I want to know what happened. What did you think? What did you feel? What did you say? So I had to go back 30 or 40 years and recount those emotions. I thought I had a happy life till I started writing a book.
And I'll add that I think that my dad's natural way of kind of recounting life is what you see and what you're talking about in terms of like taking a big horrible thing and turning it into a speed bump in his head, which can be a great strength. But I think like most things in life, things that can be a strength can also be a weakness. And it's really about discernment. And so it was really special to get to say, oh, no. We're not going to like rose-colored glasses, just like only look at the good parts here. Let's dig into this, because if we want to teach, the hard parts are where we learn from. We don't learn from the things that went really well very easily. So it was really special.
You know, that's so true. And I find that the longer that story is in the rear view mirror, the more comfortable we tend to become with owning that, right? So if I'm in this oh shit moment right now and my business is about to go under, I really am very uncomfortable talking about it because I need to have this positive mindset in order to get through it.
I would tell you that challenges and big problems are best seen looking back, but I think everything happens for a reason. And when we have bad things, what we consider bad things happen to us, it's because there are lessons to learn. And until we learn them, they keep happening. When we learn them, they stop and other bad things happen. So life is a series of learning as we go forward. And Charly helped me to see how much I've learned in my life.
I would also add that, and you touched on this, Roxy, the mindset that we need when we're in crisis is very different than the mindset that we need when we've come out of it. And so part of the things that make it hard to share the hard parts when we're in crisis is sort of our system protecting ourselves to focus on that needed goal. But if we can't adjust our mindset once we've exited it, then the things that have helped us in one situation are going to tear us down if we can't adapt.
And so the title of our book, Turning Crisis into Success, really talks about crisis after crisis after crisis and how I dealt with it. And I will tell you one of the things that Charly taught me as I look back on it is every single time I got out of crisis, I asked for help. And I never realized that. And most people think asking for help is a weakness.
Right.
In essence, it really is a strength, because especially startup entrepreneurs, they only see a few choices. And by asking for help, we see a much broader range of options that we can choose.
So Charly, I want to go back to what you said for a minute, just to make sure it's really clear for our audience. Kind of paint us a picture of what does that mindset look like in the crisis moment, and then kind of transitioning to that coping mechanism. And then how does that mindset transition when you're out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say there's that really intense focus on persistence. And sometimes in crisis, we have the one goal we're moving towards and just everything falls away except for that goal. But all crises are not the same. Sometimes the key to getting out of a crisis is being able to not just be honed in on that one option, but as my dad was talking about, asking for help, being able to see more options available. But it's almost like if we think of the sprint, right? Like oftentimes crisis is really pushing ourselves through a super intense, hard moment. So for my dad, there was business crises. For me, when I was in health crises, it was simply, I have to focus on surviving. I have to focus on getting through this. And I can't focus on anything else. There's a very intense presence to it. But for my life experience, when I got out of that health crisis and I kept focus on moving forward and I didn't let myself relax or process or any of that, for me, that's what I think very much led to PTSD. Was that inability to process and integrate and deal with it. And when we look at crises in business situations, it's not the exact same thing, but our brains don't actually recognize the difference between life and death threat and business and professional crises. The chemicals released in our brain are the same, maybe to different degrees. So if we get out of a business crisis and we're still kind of like in that wound up, like, what's the next thing? I have to focus. I have to move. If we're in that intense space and it never relaxes, that really builds up. It harms us personally, but also professionally, because it kind of impedes our ability to be really creative and to kind of like open and relax and release and to see more broadly. We can kind of sometimes keep that tunnel vision. So it's really about being able to have the self-awareness to stop and say, what's important right now? Where am I at right now? And as my dad highlighted, who can I ask for help? Because we're just not going to have all the answers, no matter what type of crisis it is. We're going to do better if we can get help or get insight or support from folks who can see more than we can.
So that's very wonderful. And I'm so glad that you took the time to describe that, because I think that's going to be so beneficial to the audience. And I want to go back to, I read your book, I think probably within the first or second week of the pandemic, right? Of early March. And I thought, oh my gosh, I bet these authors could have never predicted in a million years that this book would be published before a global pandemic.
Sure.
And so what was that like for you, knowing that you had already written a book and published it around turning crisis into success, and then kind of seeing what we've all just experienced around the world for the last year and a half?
Well, obviously at the time, nobody knew what was coming, okay? But it was very apropos for the situation we were facing as a world. So it was just our opportunity to try and help people and share with them the lessons we've learned as we went forward. I will just go back for 1 second for your audience and say, in crisis, one of the most critical things to do is to remember that the imperfect solution to the correct problem is more important than the perfect solution to the wrong problem.
Can you say that one more time?
Yes, I want to say very
so freaking powerful.
This is really important as we get into crisis. Is what I said is the imperfect solution to the correct problem is more important than a perfect solution to the wrong problem. So many of us get in a crisis and we search all over, but we're looking in the wrong places. So it's, I think as we went out, we would talk, what really is your challenge? What is, start from the outcome and work your way back. But really focus, it's not about being, I always ask people, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Look at the outcome, what do your customers want, and then give it to them and work your way back.
Absolutely. So powerful. I have so many more questions for you guys today.
Hey, Charly, tell us, so when we started out, how did you feel about the book and turning crisis into success and talking to people on podcasts and things?
Yeah, it was it just felt very fulfilling, and I would say gratifying to have something that we created serve a larger purpose than we would imagine.
Yeah.
And at the same time, recognizing its limits. So for me, working in the mental health space, a lot of the lessons that we teach are not the right fit to be teaching. For example, I help run a mutual aid organization called the COVID Grief Network. So we support young adults bereaved by COVID. If I walked up to one of them and said, turn your crisis into success, I would likely get something thrown at me with good reason.
Right.
It's also recognizing, being able to appreciate where this is helpful, but I think also recognizing its limits. Sometimes we get so into our own work and our own ideas that we think this is going back to the perfect solution, perfect problem. If we think our ideas are the perfect solution to everything, we'll start to apply it to places where it doesn't make sense. So I think one really beautiful and important thing was being able to share it in a really wide arena of folks in business crisis and other forms of crisis where it is helpful, but also having the humility to say, hey, in this area, it doesn't apply here. And that doesn't mean it's not valid or it's not important. And I think that idea and that concept is also really important in so much of our professional endeavors as well. We don't have to be the perfect solution to everything. As my dad oftentimes likes to say, startups often die of indigestion, not starvation. So recognizing our own limits, whether it's of our markets or of our ideas, actually makes them much stronger.
So what do you mean by that? What is this indigestion?
What I really mean is, so to stay focused on what you're trying to do. So many people try and do so many things. We started up a latex glove business in the late 80s, okay? And we ended up running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 for many, many years. We developed a powder-free glove. People wanted us to get into the condom business. They wanted us to get into other healthcare stuff that we could distribute. And we just stayed in our lane because we couldn't do it enough. So many people get started, they have a good idea, and then they try and do 2, 3, or 4 other things, and they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the expertise. They're trying to broaden instead of getting deep and really truly understanding their customers. The most important thing for an entrepreneur is truly to understand their customer, to become a customer expert.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe we get rewarded in direct proportion to the needs we fill. So we need to understand the needs and fill them.
Which seems so obvious and so easy, but we still really struggle with it. I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, there's so much ego that we have to put down and lay aside in order to go, you know what, I don't, even if I thought I had all the answers, and maybe I do, but to put that down and go, it doesn't really even matter, that my customer trumps whatever I think and believe, as long as I'm staying true to my mission. How I fulfill that is really should be driven by the customer so much more than my own desires if I want to be successful.
My executives used to ask me what I think about products and strategy. And I'd say, don't ask me, go ask the customer. I mean, Wayne Gretzky had a great line. Wayne Gretzky is the best hockey player that ever lived. And one of the sports writers in the locker room said to him, Wayne, how can you be the best hockey player ever? You don't skate fast. You don't have a hard slap shot. You're not very big. He says, I don't know. I just skate to where the puck is going to be.
Yeah.
And in business, it's the same thing. We can't live where people need today. What are customers going to need in the future? And let's give it to them.
So that one of the things that comes to mind when I hear you say that is this phenomenon that I've seen happen a lot with healthcare entrepreneurs who, maybe their customers were providers, were hospital systems or medical offices, and that completely closed down during the pandemic. And so access to their target market was just a huge barrier. And then all of a sudden you had, this need within communities across the world for PPE. And so, a lot of them just completely dropped their original business idea and pivoted to being able to supply that. And it worked well for some, but it didn't work well for a lot. Just kind of talk about, your perspective. I think you kind of touched on a little bit about going in different lanes, but, as an entrepreneur and you're examining potential pivots, what are you looking for when you're making that decision?
Well, I'm always looking for the future. Okay. And remember, crisis is just change over a very short period of time. Okay. So that means, and the world's been in crisis. So the question is, what is changing and what is our customer going to need in the future? And so though I love change, I see it as an opportunity to do things better and differently. I always like to ask my customers one really important question. I would say to them, what would you like to do today that you can't, that would have the biggest impact on your business?
And he doesn't just ask his customers that. He asks everyone that.
Because I love to learn. But the real issue is, if you want to know what to do, ask your customers what they need. Now, you might not be able to give it to them, but that's where we start getting into. So the world is changing. Telemedicine is coming. People are going to need different products. So for entrepreneurs today, what's it going to be like 2 or 3 years from now? What are people going to need? What are their tools they're going to use to get to where they want to go? And the only way to figure that out is to ask the customers, who's your future customers and what are they going to need?
And I would also add on top of that, I think it's so valuable to figure out what our customers need, but also having a self-awareness and a recognition of, can we meet those needs? Because as you were saying, shifting to PPE didn't work for everyone. That was clearly a huge need. But, for example, one of the examples we talk about in the book is asking a customer, what they needed. And I don't know if this went in the book or if we've just talked about it. But basically, like my dad didn't have the answer to what they needed, but he knew someone who did and was able to connect them. And so that initial action didn't change his business. But then after he was able to help their need get met through someone who was better suited to it, when they went to order their gloves, they went to SafeSkin, they went to my dad's company. And so being able to recognize when we can help by connecting someone to the better fit for their need requires some humility sometimes. And so I would just again, going back to your question about that pivot to PPE, sometimes we're trying to do things we're not fit to do because we just see it as the biggest, shiniest need, but that doesn't mean that it's the only need that's there. So it's also being able to look and see like, what are the key needs and where does it make sense, or where can I pivot to step in?
And where it was in the book, okay, and what that really leads to is what we try to become is the trusted advisor to our customers. So they can look to us for answers, not just for products, okay? Once we become their trusted advisor, they'll ask us for all sorts of things.
And I like what you're kind of leaning towards. We don't have to go too deep here, but it's kind of a network of partnerships and alliances. So that way you don't have to be all things to all people. You have your lanes that you swim in. So that way you can be great at those things, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a referrer or, introducing and having other key players that could deliver value to that customer, because, you kind of get credit for that in a way. And it still serves your business well.
Correct. What Charlie was talking about is it was a big hospital in Pittsburgh. Okay. We were trying to sell them gloves and they wouldn't, we couldn't sell them. Okay. And they had a need and they told me they needed to move the gloves from one floor to another. They had enough gloves. They just didn't. And so I introduced them to a buddy of mine who's on the board of a company that moved products around robotically. And 6 months later, she called me up and said, "Could you please come in here?" And she gave us an order. We took over the hospital.
That's awesome. So if you don't mind, let's just kind of go deeper into these transparent moments of where your darkest days, your darkest moments. We won't stay here long.
Oh, well, Charlie loved these moments. She says the only place we learn is in pain and in dark moments.
Yeah. Well,
we learn best.
Only
we
place.
Learn best. And me, I like to kind of block it and move on. But
Yes. Yeah.
But I would also add, one of the reasons I enjoy it is I think generally as a society, we look at our leaders and we look at folks who are successful and we like to only see the good. And to me, I think it's really valuable, as you had brought up as well. So it's not just that I love to watch my dad squirm and suffer, although that is a nice little cherry on the cake. But I do think it's really, really useful.
Well, it's actually been very beneficial for me. I've learned so much, writing the book, dealing with Charlie. I've actually learned.
Gosh, I imagine it's like $50,000 worth of therapy writing this book together.
And then some.
For her or for me?
Both of you. But definitely.
I offer it and I get
it. So let's go there. As you think about, the different companies that you've built and those journeys, talk a little bit about those moments where you couldn't make payroll or you thought maybe you needed to shut the business down, just some of those challenges. And then what was that like emotionally and mentally?
Probably the hardest moment in my business life came in 1990. We had sold the business to Coca-Cola. As a family, made lots of money. We dumped all of the money into SafeSkin, our second company. And I got
which is something probably a lot of people can relate to.
Right. We drew a line.
Pouring everything you had.
We drew a line that kept pouring more and more money in. And in October 1990, I got foreclosure notices and personal guarantees being called in Malaysia.
And just to add, I was 6 months old. My brother was 3.5.
Wow.
So I I was shocked. I knew we were in trouble, but we had no money and had foreclosure notices.
And this is after you had already sold to Coca-Cola.
We sold to Coca-Cola, made millions of dollars, took all of it and put it into SafeSkin, and now had nothing left.
Wow.
Okay. I had a wife.
What a dark day.
I had a wife and 3.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. And so I explained to my wife, and she says, "Don't worry, I'll go back to work." And I said, "Honey, you're a registered dietitian. You can make $70,000 a year. I owe $10 million. You take care of the kids.
Do the math.
And let me figure out how to get out of this." Okay. And that was probably one of the darkest moments. And that day we had a party to go to, that my 40th birthday party for a friend. I didn't want to go. And my wife, my wife says, "No, you promised to go. Your best friends will be there. Go." We went. And at the party, I shared with my best friends what was going on, and they said, how do you keep your emotions intact? How do you even be here? And I said, listen, if I lose it all, I believe I have the necessary tools to rebuild. I don't want to, okay? But as long as I have my health and my family, okay, all I can do is my best, do it a day at a time. Now, it wasn't easy. It took years, and I'd run on the beach. I'd meditate. I do all sorts of things, but I have the ability to separate my self-worth from my success or failures. And I think at that moment, I didn't think I was a failure, though I thought I was not the greatest, okay? But it is just because the business was failing, I was still want to be a good father, a good husband, and things like that.
And I would also add, just do a little shout out to my mom, she is such a huge source of support in all of our lives. And I think that in writing the book, what I recognized was their partnership and how she showed up to their partnership really was very, very crucial in his ability to do all these things that we're talking about. If he didn't have that rock solid, super steady support, and she advised on business stuff as well.
Without a doubt. So to answer your question, in the darkest moments, the problem is we only see the problem. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, the solution. So the answer is to focus on the positive, focus on the outcomes, focus on the possibilities, not what's going wrong, but what can we do right, and staying positive and keeping ourselves uplifted. When the tide comes in, all the boats go up and the tide goes out. You see who's naked, right? So the issue is you guys stay afloat long enough in order to get, and it changes. The world changes. I mean, the thing about crisis is you look back and you say, why didn't I see that? Okay, because you can't. You're limited. We are limited in our views.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll add to that is, and this is kind of reinforcing, but I think it's very easy to underestimate how important our relationships are, not just his with my mom, but his close friends, his family. When we have a strong network of support emotionally and have those close relationships, whether it's a mental health crisis, whether it's a professional crisis, it's not going to solve the problem, but what happens is we have a lot of different pieces that build that foundation. So my dad has always meditated. He's talked about, running on the beach, and having all of these small processes. It's still excruciating, but if he didn't have all of those networks of support and all of those practices, I don't think it would have been possible in the same way. And also sometimes we do need it's really important to stay focused and stay positive. And sometimes we need a little break in space where we say, you know what, I just need to be furious. I need to scream. I need to cry. I need to let that emotion out so that there's space for me to just focus. And it's going to be different for everyone. So emotionally, what fits one person isn't going to be the right model for another. So it's recognizing what are the supports that best suit me, and what do I need? And unfortunately, there is no quick checklist that's going to be the same across the board.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask for next. No, I'm teasing.
There are some common themes and there are some common ones.
But go back. The way I got out of that crisis is I asked for help. Okay, so I actually called a young president's organization person in Malaysia, okay, who helped me, put me in touch with a bank that was able to get me an additional 30 days. We replaced the bank. So the issue is, it goes back to, in a crisis, we try and solve it ourselves so many times. And the real question is, what's the correct problem and who can help me?
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So it sounds like you guys, when I hear you describe it, it sounds like you're talking about mindset training, this kind of idea of, business being more of a mental gymnastics than it is about the business decisions, or maybe even some of the product decisions that we're making that really are foundational.
Right, but it goes even further. I mean, the real issue is, knowing your customer, not getting into crisis, okay? We all get into crisis, okay? But the real question is, how do we, stay focused? How do we open up to the world? So we have to train our mindset to stay positive, stay solution oriented. But the real issue is, the CEO of the entrepreneur's challenge is, how do you solve tomorrow's problems today? How do you cut them off? How do you solve them when they're small? How do you see around corners so you see what's going to happen next? Those are the skill sets you have to develop.
And I'll add an addendum to that. I don't think it's necessarily staying positive. I think it's returning to positive.
Okay, that's better.
If we create the expectation that we just need to stay positive throughout it, that's setting ourselves up for failure. But it's recognizing like we can get pulled, just how meditation works. We get distracted, we get pulled out. And a really strong meditation practice is not about always being centered. Although if we're not into meditation, maybe that's what we think it looks like. But if you talk to the greatest meditation teachers across the board, people will say, it's not about not getting pulled or distracted. It's about being able to pull ourselves in with more ease, or pull ourselves in with more skill. And so it's a process of coming back to ourselves.
Yeah. So one of the things that I say, when I'm working with clients, that there's a whole group, more than I would like to see or admit, but there is a whole group that are still just waiting for things to go back to the way they were before the pandemic. And I'm like, guys, grieve, have the funeral, get there as fast as you can, go through the process so you can get to the other side of having the vision of what's next, because it's never going to be like it was. And the longer you take to get there and just kind of have this wishful thinking, the more market share your competitors are stealing from you.
Well, you should actually be excited, because if things were the way they were, all your competitors would have everything. Things are changing. So it's now a race. So it's not how big you are, it's how fast you are. So how can you get there first, fast, and best? Okay. Yeah. And then get out of the way once the elephants start dancing.
So I do want to just give a shout out to your wife, because I do remember that being a common thread throughout the entire book. I mean, every time you would share those stories, it was just like the whole family, the whole unit of you guys is like just Team Jaffe. And I was like, wow, and I can only imagine the impact that really has on your success, being able to have that champion, that raving fan that believes in you, that's alongside of you on a day-to-day basis and ready to roll up her sleeves. Like, hey, if I need to go back to work, we'll just go back to work. We just do what we have to do.
Well, I'm lucky I'm married to an angel, so not everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about persistence. And so one of the questions that I want to ask you, both of you, is, at what point do we, because as entrepreneurs, it's usually that like stubbornness, that kind of like, I'm an overcomer kind of attitude and personality that helps us be successful in our journey. But at what point do we determine that it's really like the key here is not for me just to be bullheaded and persistent in the vision that I have, but really being open to feedback that I'm getting, and I need to change something or I need to let something go? How do you balance that?
Well, let me ask Charly, because she always asks me.
Well, I was about to say, I was like, no, you don't get to turn this on me.
When do you persist and when do you pivot?
So I was going to say, absolutely not. So this was my question. You don't get to flip it on me, although it's very good that you tried.
Yeah.
So that's the question that I kept going back to with my dad, because I said, it's so hard to tell. How do I have that discernment? How do I know? And so do you remember what you would say to me or what you said around this?
At this stage, I don't remember much. So I'll just do it all over again. Well, again, I believe in persistence, okay? So I don't think it's a choice of persistence or pivoting. I think you continue to persist in another direction.
Also known as pivot.
Right. So I think it's not either or. So I think as you get, and it's tough, and I mentor young entrepreneurs who actually face running out of money. What do I do next? Okay. And the issue is, you have to see the future. You have to see what your capabilities are. Sometimes it's in your best interest to move on to something else. Okay. So there's no right answer, but I think as in everything, our customers have the answers. Okay. So whether we persist or whether we pivot is we could probably pivot to a new need the customer has. So if we're trying to give them something that's not working, it's because they don't really need it. So we really need to say, hey, what do you need? And let's find out. So it's much easier to fill a need than to push a rock uphill, try and force people to buy things. Okay.
Why is it so difficult for us to not only just have that in our head, but like live that out? Because I work with so many people that are like, I experienced the problem. I know what the solution is. I don't need to test this business idea. I just need to build the product. I'm going to put millions of dollars into it, bring it to market. And then it's like, nobody's buying my stuff.
Do they want to be right or do they want to be successful? Most people want to prove they're right. Okay. Mm-hmm. When I was asked that question, I said, I want to be successful. And I was told by my coach, why do you keep acting like you want to be right?
Ooh.
And I would also add that, in the example you're talking about, what those folks are doing is they're centering themselves as the most important customer. And in reality, unless you're going to be able to buy all of your product or all of your services, you are not the most important customer. And so it's when we talk about ego, it's so helpful when it's harnessed and utilized well, right? Like when we talk about persistence, ego can be very helpful in helping us persist when we just want to quit, when it's used responsibly. But if it overtakes and spills out and we can't rein it in, again, it can kind of crush our dreams in so many ways. And so if we center ourselves as the biggest need and the biggest problem, then we're just going to stick with, our idea or what we need. But if we can put the ego aside a bit and have a little bit more self-awareness and really focus and say, who are the customers, as my dad will say until he's blue in the face, and what do they need? It's being able to center on the experience of others and not of ourselves, which can be tough when we have what feels like our baby. It's hard it can feel like killing our babies. When we talk about the creative process, they'll say, kill your darlings. And that's, I think, a very useful practice to get into, is learning how to let go of these things we're so attached to, by being able to recognize, I don't want to be right in my idea and what works for me. I want to be successful in filling this need. And when we don't realize that this is a choice, we're making decisions without realizing it.
Ooh, that's so good.
That's wonderful. And pivoting is not just when you're in crisis. Question is, entrepreneurs, when is it right to sell? Okay. Mm-hmm. So when do I give up my baby, so to speak, or when do I, and that's another challenge, to realize we don't own it. Okay. The customer does. And when are we not the best person to continue it?
So let's just kind of peel that back a little bit. What are some of the things that need to be put in place early on when we want to go public or when we want to sell? What do we need? How do we need to look at that business? And maybe what is that process like, just kind of overall?
Well, going public is a vehicle to get somewhere. So going public is not a target. As far as when we go to sell it, I think both of my companies, 4 or 5 years prior to selling, I identified several targets who might buy it. I started educating them. Okay. Unfortunately, I had to sell both businesses while I was in crisis. Okay. Or I wouldn't have survived. But I had prepared 4 or 5 years earlier by talking to the president of companies, sharing why they need that product, why it's good to combine the companies. So we have to prepare for it. Okay. It wasn't easy selling both, but it was the right thing to do. And at some point, look, even as we grew our company, I questioned whether I was the right leader. Okay. Maybe I had grown myself and needed to bring somebody else in. And that happens to successful entrepreneurs where they outgrow their own capabilities. So the real issue is who's the right people to run it? Who's the right people to own it? And then we have to plan and get lucky if we want to sell it.
So you have had a lot of success, right? So even if you sold in those crisis moments, hands down, everyone in our audience would be extremely grateful to get where you have accomplished. And so that makes me think of legacy, which also is a term that's in your book. Obviously, that's really important to me. That's part of our company name. So kind of, just talk about what does legacy mean to you, and what kind of legacy is important to you before the book, during the book, and now kind of going forward.
Do you want to answer? You want to go first?
Sure. Well, I'll leave the book piece to you, since it really is about your story. But to me, and I have a little bit of a different view of it, is I don't actually think we need to wait until we're successful to start to focus on our legacy. And so for me, part of this book has been a piece of my legacy, right? But it's also pulling out my dad's legacy and knowing that, one day, God willing, my kids and grandkids will be able to read it in such personal terms.
But I'm looking forward to those days.
But I also think it's about, for me, having navigated near-death illness myself and being in a mental health space and around and in the grief space where I see so much loss before our time. I think what leads to a really beautiful, fulfilled life is about thinking about mortality, not in a morbid way, but as a way when things feel overwhelming or when it's easy to get distracted. How do I really follow that North Star of what's going to make me feel more ready to go when it is my time? And so when I think about big risks I've taken in my career, or big risks I've taken in general, that the fear could have easily stopped me, thinking about, like, at the end of my life, what do I want to have done? How do I want to have showed up? How do I want to be remembered? Are really, really helpful. And so it can be as big as creating a company or a school or a family, or as little as how do I interact with people on a day-to-day basis? And I think if we are doing things that really fulfill us and leave a strong legacy in the little ways, when we face those big problems, it's another source of support there. It's another thing that can kind of stabilize and ground us. So for me, it's about thinking both in the very little and in the very large ways.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. For me, Roxy, as we wrote this book, I have been fortunate to be successful. Okay. And it goes back to what I like to talk about is going from success to significance. Mm-hmm. So success is what we create for ourselves. Yeah. But once we create enough for ourselves, significance is what we create for other people. So for me, my legacy really is, whether it's the book, whether it's coaching entrepreneurs, whether it's I published a book of poetry, sharing my emotions. So it's how to go from success to significance. Okay. It's hard to go to significance when we're struggling to put a roof over our head, feed our kids, etc. But we do get to the point, okay, that we have enough, okay? And the only way to really elevate our souls and really make life so much more purposeful is by giving to others. Now, we don't have to wait, okay? So I'm a firm believer, a giver's gain. So if you want trust, you give trust. If you want love, you give love. If you want money, you give money to philanthropically, okay? So it's you give, okay? And the universe provides back to us.
So I love what you both are saying. I love how it's very different, but I love how it's kind of intertangled or intertwined with one another too, right? The idea of the choices that we make today, whether we make them intentionally or whether we make them automatically, are setting us on course for our legacy. And one of the things that I think is just so important, such a good reminder for entrepreneurs, is that we can become so obsessed with our business and with our empire and our success and our millions and all of this stuff that we can unintentionally leave a legacy that we're not so proud of, that we didn't want to, with our family and other aspects of our life, because we just got completely consumed and obsessed with our businesses. So I think that what you guys are talking about is kind of just this balance, but then this real intentionality with the choices that we're making and how we're investing our time and our attention and our resources.
But I don't want to make it sound easy. I work 24/7. Okay. I would go for 4 or 6 weeks to Malaysia or Thailand. I mean, my kids were young. Okay, so there's that struggle inside entrepreneurs of family, business. The business is all consuming. So it's a balance. So the question is, I wouldn't tell entrepreneurs to work less, but do the things that give you more balance. Walk in nature, find something you love to do, write, paint, find some ways, hit golf balls, whatever it is, find some way.
Write poems.
Yeah, whatever, express yourself. But whatever it takes to really, be a human being in those times where you're just so focused, go, go, go. We need to find that balance. And it's not easy. I didn't find it. I mean, don't think I found the solution. I didn't. I found what worked for me.
And I would also add that, another way of saying, these different things is presence. Like what allows you to really be present, whether you have 5 minutes, 50 minutes, 5 days, you could have a ton of time with family, but if you're never present, it doesn't really make it count. One thing that I really appreciated is that when my dad, although he was really busy when we were young, when he was with us, he did find the ability to be really present. And I think that made all the difference is, whatever time we have together, how do we make that count? And my mom was really helpful. When I was little and we would have daddy-daughter dates, my dad said, "Oh, okay, I can take her golfing." And my mom was like, "Absolutely not. This like 5-year-old girl doesn't want to go golfing."
Thank God for mom.
She wants to go horseback riding.
But with that idea of you don't have to know all the answers. So I think part of the things that allowed us to develop a really strong relationship was was my mom being able to come in and kind of coach him on how to do it. And there's no shame in that. It's really about whether it's business or family, how do we find the support that will allow us to show up as our best selves?
People like to coach me. They like to tell me what to do with my family.
Some strong women around you.
And a son. So they all seem to have their ideas. So the younger they were, the more orders I would get.
That's funny. So as we wrap up here, is there anything else that you that we haven't talked about that you would want to make sure that the audience hears from you?
No, it's just, entrepreneurship is such a wonderful journey. Okay. It's not meant for everybody. Okay. And there's nothing wrong in trying and failing. Okay. You try it, and you go back and do something else. It's not the end of the world. Okay. Yeah. But defeat is when you get knocked down. Failure is when you give up. So if you want to end something, that's fine. Okay. You want to turn into something else, that's fine. But the bottom line is healthcare is a very slow changing industry. And so keeping the expectations in line and getting out ahead of it. But the real thing, if you go back, is become customer experts. Okay. Ask customers what they need and then give it to them. And realize that what they say today, they don't always know it.
Right.
Henry Ford had said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses.
Right.
If you gave them a car. So it's being able to read between the lines of what people say they want and being able to understand the needs beneath it. And I would also just add this is a little bit more of a tangential note, but again, coming from the mental health space where I really care about folks' mental health. When we look at entrepreneurs, the mental health rates are not great, which is not surprising, right? There's a lot of stress.
We gotta be crazy,
But so I would add is sometimes there's this false belief that I need to bury it, or I need to not talk about it, or I need to just push through it. And the ability to, rather than doing that, the ability to acknowledge it. And it doesn't have to be with everyone, but finding those folks where you can say, here's what's going on. Chances are, if you have a lot of entrepreneur friends, you're not the only one. And even if your friends are not entrepreneurs, we've just gone through, we're coming through a very intense moment in time. Everyone has been struggling almost with mental health. And so whether we're talking about challenges in business or challenges internally, finding the places where we can talk about it can relieve some of that pressure, but it can also help us learn the lessons we need to move forward. So being able to kind of put that ego aside, rein it in a little bit, and find those places of connection can really transform the experience for everyone involved.
And then, Roxy, I was going to say, our book, Turning Crisis into Success, we have a website, crisisintosuccess.com. And if some of your entrepreneur listeners have questions, there's a place on the website they can send us questions and things like that, and we'll try and respond.
Perfect. That was going to be my next question. How do they find the book, and how do they follow up with you if they have questions? You already answered it.
The book is at Amazon, on Kindle, and there's an audio book, as you told us you listened to. Okay. And the website is crisisintosuccess.com. And
you read the book. You read it's your voice for the audio book. So I'm like I said, I'm very familiar with your voice.
A great story is I didn't think I would do it. And my wife when I was debating having the perfect solution, okay, she said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have something for our kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids to hear your voice and hear your story?
Oh, legacy.
That's why I did it.
Legacy.
Right. Legacy goes back to your legacy, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much for agreeing to be with me today and sharing your wisdom and your story and your inspiration and encouragement. I know that our audience is just going to get so much from this episode. So thank you.
Thank you. We really enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah,
okay.
Our pleasure.
We hope to catch up with you again soon in the future.
Sounds
Good luck to all your entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.